Page 80, 81, and 82. Arkansas Traveler. We are again capoed at the second fret. The song is in the key of D. If you were not capoed, it would be considered in the key of C. But we are capoed, and therefore we go to the next letter of the alphabet, key of D, after C. Got that? Okay. The first page of it, of Arkansas Traveler, on page 80, is what is called the implied melody. What that means, it's following the chord structure for the song, but kind of dancing around the melody. The melody is not in your face, so to speak. There is an intro of Taters that you could also use for a tune like Soldier's Joy, which is also in the key of D. So let me play the Taters, then I'll start a little bit of the melody and talk a little more about what an implied melody means. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So I just played from the beginning through the first note of measure 9. So the implied melody, if you think of the melody that comes to mind with this tune, think of the children's song. I'm bringing home a baby bumblebee. Do 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 do. So you will hear some of those notes of that typical melody in this implied melody version, but not all of them. Let me take it at number 5 again. Think of the melody in your head. La da 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 da. Here I go. 3 and 4 and... Some of the melody is there, and some is sort of a representation of the melody. And that continues for this entire first solo for Arkansas Traveler. The fingerings are something that you're probably used to, so I won't go through a lot more of page 80. Moving on to the accompaniment, the first section of the accompaniment is pretty straightforward. But let's look at the B section of the accompaniment. This is on page 81. Letter B, and I'm looking at measure 29, the first measure of letter B. That's pretty typical accompaniment figures for C, F, C. But here I go to a form of G7, which is 4th string 3rd fret, and then a pluck. If you add that F note on the 4th string 3rd fret, you're getting the 7th of the G chord in a low note. So I recommend in the chart that you do it with ring finger, but I've also been known to use my pinky on that 4th string 3rd fret, because coming from C just before the G, the pinky is free to reach over. So let me start again at measure 29 and play up through the end of the line. Talk about a few more things there. Measure 29, 1 and 2, 3, 4. So that was some new stuff in measures 31 and 32. Measure 31 begins with a 3-note C chord. Now here we do a little figure against the G chord. It's a G7 figure again because it involves that low F note at the 4th string, ring finger on the 2nd string 3rd fret, back to the 4th string 3rd fret. You might be asking, why are you using this G7 oriented note stuff against a plain old G above? Well, in the key of C, your 3 primary chords are... Did you give the answer? C, and then skip up, count at your fingers, C, D, E, F. F is the 4 chord, and then from F you go to the next letter of the alphabet, and you get F to G. C, F, and G are your primary chords. 1 chord is C, 4 chord is F, 5 chord is G. If the 5 chord is G, you can interchange plain old G with a G7. So that's what I did here with the little figure in measure 31. Then in measure 32, I do a similar figure, but back to a C chord position because the chord at hand is C. And then back to G, a little pinch on 2 open strings, and then a pinch on the outer strings. Something new there. Hopefully you can incorporate figures like that into other tunes as you come across these kinds of chord changes. Now flip the page over to page 82. Unfortunately, there's a few tunes in this book that require page turns. I tried to avoid them where I could, but I couldn't entirely. So this is one of those with a page turn. So this is page 82 is Arkansas Traveler, the literal melody. And that means I'm bringing home a baby bumblebee. All those melody notes will be heard in this, and therefore I'm extracting more of the exact melody. Maybe not fully exact, but closer to it. So let me play a little bit of that for you, and again, keeping that bringing home a baby. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that took me through the entire A part, and that high bit is a direct taking of the melody to the tune. That high bit begins at measure 43. You bar the 10th fret. Now keep in mind this bar is really at the double dot. That double dot is no longer the 12th fret because of your capo. It is now reduced to being the 10th fret. So here is measure 43 and 44 again with a count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now another tricky aspect of this A part on page 82 is you end the first time with a single quarter note 3rd string open, but the second time you will use 2 8th notes, 2nd string 5th and 1st string 3rd. Those 2 notes get you to the B part. if you did them both times, it would sound kind of silly. This was the only way I could think of to illustrate it without stretching a measure or something like that. So watch out for those things. There are several of those indicators in this version of it. The B part of the tune, of this version of the tune on page 82, is highly melodic style banjo playing. This is replicating what a fiddle player might play in the B part in this more literal melody presentation. So I will take it from the pickup notes on the previous line. That's measure 44. The last two notes, which would bring you into measure 45. I'll give you a 3 count. Before I do that, though, notice in measure 45, at the end of the measure, you're going to have to shift your index finger to the 2nd string 6th fret, and then in measure 46, your pinky grabs the 3rd string 9th fret. It's the only way to keep a melodic passage like this going without doubling a picking hand finger or something like that. So these weird transitions are for smoothness of operation. Okay, I'm going back to measure 44, the last two notes of the measure, 5-3. I'll give you 3 beats with the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Shift. And then it returns back. The second time through, when you're in that final measure, measure 52 of the B part, rather than doing those pickup notes you did the first time through, you just do a single quarter note, 3rd string open to get you into the ending. And I may as well do that ending because that involves some pretty tricky fretting hand shifts as well. It starts off with a C fill we used in Blues in C some time back. So here's the ending. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now, on the next track, we'll do the full, slow playthrough of Arkansas Traveler.